The 10-minute talent rant is live. I'm James Hornick, joined by Jeff Smith, and we are on the clock. The 10-minute talent rant is our ongoing series where we like to break down things that are broken in the talent acquisition and hiring space, and maybe even pitch a solution or two. For this week's topic, I wanted to do a series of lesser understood killers of your recruiting process. And these are things that have an enormous negative impact, getting people who would have accepted an offer to ultimately decline. So part one of this series, I present to you our scathing critique of last minute interview cancellations. Jeff, would you like to, and I guess I should say, I should preface this by saying emergencies happen, but last minute cancellations happen far more often than hospital visits. I've done the math on this. So anyways.
The joke was, if hospital visits had a correlation to both sides requesting, an amended schedule for interviews, all of our premiums would be like 10 grand a month.
Yeah. And we're not talking like proactive schedule, but we're talking about like the day of, a minute before a bomb goes. There's always, it happens far more often.
A dog gnawed my leg off.
Yeah. So anyways,
Jeff,
why don't you kick us off here? Walk us through, because we want to break this down to kind of like each phase of the interview process and why it's destructive. So do you want to kick us off here?
Yeah, sure. So I think, like you said, there's three distinct phases, and the early part of the process is definitely with recruiters or early HR screenings. It doesn't take too long to be known as flaky in the industry. If your recruiters are missing calls, like, you just simply have no chance. It's literally your first impression. One of the tenets of human nature is to want to feel wanted and included. And if you're not at a minimum showing up on time, or at least giving some sort of indication that you have some empathy towards and acknowledgement to their time, you've lost the game already. And we talked about this at length. If your recruiters, even our recruiters, if we're chronically late, like, find a new career. Like, candidates and employers, like, they lean on us to be prompt, to be professional. And if you can't do that basic tenet, this isn't the job for you.
Yeah, this seems awfully basic, but it still happens. And I've heard it's putting a lid on the top of your funnel, and you're not even allowed to get any traction to kind of get your sales process going, or your recruiting process going. Sorry. Let's kick it to I think phase 2 and phase 3 are the more interesting aspects of this topic. The middle process. So imagine a scenario where, you had a job seeker interview with your firm with a recruiter and they loved it. Super excited. Your employer brand is great. Your first interaction with the recruiter is great. They're really into what you're doing, and they have an interview set up with the hiring manager or the team lead, or kind of the first kind of real meat of the interview process. And it just evaporates at the last minute. It gets canceled the day of, the minute of, within the last hour. We'll talk about how that sours things.
Yeah, I think, we talked a lot about, like, all the good vibes, they get smashed. Everything that recruiter or that HR individual built, as far as trust, has been eroded within 5 seconds. I think that, like, these monikers of being really busy or having big projects, like, these are the signal calls to a prospective employee that this is what they're going to walk into when they join the organization. So, I think the other thing that people have to keep in mind is these are the exact scenarios. We've talked a lot about the relationship between business and recruiting, right? These are the things that foster that animosity between talent acquisition and the business itself. Like, if the candidate bails, hiring managers feel like HR or recruiting didn't do their job. And conversely, recruiters think that hiring managers don't care. And so, like, it completely erodes that relationship. And, frankly, those are the situations where like the candidate really starts to see, gosh, is this recruiter like falling on the sword for the hiring manager? And recruiters also feel like, gosh, there's only so much that I can cloak this without it looking completely ridiculous.
Yeah, the thing that because a lot of times recruiters end up taking the fall for when these situations happen when it wasn't their fault, and I'm talking internal recruiters and HR people, and eventually they just get sick of it, eventually that they don't trust the hiring managers or the business units because who wants to work with flaky people, And I'm kind of saying this to guys, like, again, like your occasional emergency can happen, but we see this a lot where it's always we hear about the same companies doing this. It's always kind of the same hiring managers. It becomes kind of a culture thing where they just don't respect the interview process, and it's not a high priority for them. And kind of on all levels, with both job seekers and with their own coworkers, the people kind of working with them, it kind of it erodes things. So
the last thing I would say with that before we go to the late process stuff is, hiring managers may be well intended to fill a job, but the idea that candidates are going to line up and accept, situations where they're chronically late or, not prepared is just, it's a fallacy. Like, it's just not true. That opens you up to seeing the candidate pool that you've always seen, which are, the folks who aren't employed, that you're never going to attract anyone that's proactive or that's passively looking or window shopping.
All right, late phase. Let's talk about this. Executive level, the people who are supposed to come in and ultimately, quote unquote, close the candidates, get them excited, tell them the vision. You're one of 1 or 3 finalists, and all of a sudden the interview gets canceled at the last second. What's this really signal to candidates that companies need to realize?
Yeah, it's the trickle-down effect. It's, executives who behave in a transactional manner, like it is, again, a signal call of how they will meddle in the day-to-day parts of the business. And this is where that vibe, like, talk about like good vibes getting crushed, exponentially. Like, yeah, it's destructive in the middle part, but at the end, you've got everybody running towards the same thing, and the executive feels like, all right, we've got this batch of 2 to 3 folks. I don't necessarily need to do much. Maybe that's what's going on in their head. I don't know. But just those little minor details can destroy the deal. And then not only are the recruiters left holding the bag, but the hiring managers are as well.
There's nothing worse than flaky leadership. Full stop. And I guess, and I want to kind of discern between the two things. There is a difference between leaders who are busy and have a hard time scheduling. That's not this. That's not what we're talking about. We're putting people who actually get you on the schedule and then chronically, habitually end up canceling because they can't manage their own time. I don't subscribe to the idea that anyone is so important or so high up that the basic tenets of business acumen, don't apply to them. And I don't think job seekers do either, So, and I think that's what people need to realize is you're never so high up in an organization where just canceling and bailing on people and overcommitting chronically, doesn't get recognized as a red flag to others. So
I would argue, and maybe you agree, I would argue that any time an executive is involved with an interview process and it's well thought out, it is the single most important factor of swinging somebody who's on the fence to the right side of the
Great point. The opposite's true. When people can talk to executives and know, they're easy to work with, relatable, responsible, like that's what gets people over the goal line. So,
yep.
Fixes. I don't think there's a whole lot to this one. Just understand that talking to your recruits, people you're trying to get on board is the highest priority. Like, there's nothing more important in business than like your employees and getting the people you need to be successful. And that's why I want to talk about this one is that I hate to sound obvious, but like overcommitting yourself and deprioritizing people you're trying to on board, worst thing you can do.
Yeah. My main takeaway is recruiters definitely don't overcommit. Make sure that you have a good slate of calls, and then hiring managers, block out some time so that you're showing your talent acquisition folks and the candidates that you mean business and that you're ready to allocate some time to that effort.
And we're short on clock, so that's a wrap for this week. Thanks again for tuning into the 10-Minute Talent Rant, part of the Talent Insights series, which is always available for replay on the HireWell YouTube channel, as well as the Talent Insights podcast on Apple Podcasts, Google Podcasts, Spotify, and YouTube. Thanks again, Jeff, and everyone out there. We'll see you soon.